When I was learning about shotguns, I remember that gauge and all the different payloads was a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around, and so in this video, we're gonna go over what each of those are. I'm Chris Cheng, History Channel's Top Shot Season 4 champion and professional marksman for Bass Pro Shops. Here we've got two different shotguns. One's a 12 gauge and one's a 20 gauge, and they're both Mossberg shotguns. But how do we know which gauge is which? At first glance, they kind of look identical. The way you tell is by looking at the stamping on the barrel. It'll mention 20 gauge, 12 gauge, or there are other gauges available, but 12 and 20 gauge are the common beginner gauges. So now that we know how to determine your shotgun's gauge, let's take a look at what the ammo looks like. Here we have a 12 gauge round. In the middle, we have a 20 gauge round, and on the end here, we have actually another round, which is a 410 round. Now the 410 round, it's really small, as you can see, and typically it's more of an advanced round, so I'm gonna set this aside, and we're just gonna talk about the 12 and 20 gauge round. Now, the way this works, I'm gonna just really simplify this for you, is that the smaller the gauge number, the larger the round. So here is a 12 gauge round, which is larger than the 20 gauge round. Another thing to take into consideration is your shotgun shell length. 2 3/4 inch or 3-inch shells are common, but they can go as large as 3.5 inches as well. This will also be noted on the side of your shotgun barrel, so make sure that your shotgun shell length matches whatever is stamped on your barrel. Now to talk about payloads, we've got 3 common payloads right in front of us here. We have birdshot, buckshot, and slugs. Now with birdshot, as you can see here, it's these smaller BBs, which are common in competition, in hunting, and also in trap, skeet, and sporting clays. In the middle here, we have buckshot, which are these larger BBs, common in home defense and hunting. And then finally, we have slugs, which are these huge chunks of metal, basically really similar to a bullet. Let's talk now about the composition of a shotgun shell and what's happening here. Now, when the shell is inside of a shotgun, on the end here, we have a primer in the center of the shell here. Now, when you pull the trigger, a firing pin gets released and hits that primer. Now, what happens, the primer ignites. There's a small little spark that goes off inside. We now then have gunpowder in this part of the shell. There is a plastic wad that is holding the payload, and the payload is all the way in the end of the front of the shell. So let's take a closer look at the inside of a shell now that you know what's going on. I've got a shell that I've already cut open, so I'm going to lift off the outside part there, and you see a bunch of that shot come out. Here's a bunch of that shot. All right, throw it over the left shoulder for good luck. Here's that wad I was talking about. All right, made out of plastic. And then finally, we've got the powder all in there as well. All right, so now that you have an understanding of gauge and the different payloads, birdshot, buckshot, and slugs, if you're looking for a place to shoot, check out wheretoshoot.org to find a range near you. And finally, always remember that firearm safety depends on you.